In a quiet Mesopotamian village, beside the Euphrates, villagers are farming peacefully. They feel safe. Suddenly, the land is covered in shadows. Everyone stares at the sky. Clouds as big as mountains loom threateningly overhead, and a general sense of discomfort makes everyone understand that today, things may not go according to plan. Fathers rush to their homes, call their wives and children inside, and warn them to bow to the floor and to cover their mouths tightly. Suddenly, Enlil displays his immense power. Trees uprooted by winds, as if plucked by an invisible hand. Mountains devoured by earthquakes, as if swallowed by a voracious beast. Who dares to speak is struck by lightning. Meanwhile, hailstones as big as fists devastate crops and penetrate roofs, causing hundreds of fatalities. The thunderstorm lasts for several hours before weakening into a simple rainfall. Enlil retreats to the mountains. In his wake, thousands of acres of ruined crops will not bear fruits. Hundreds of families will not see their loved ones alive tomorrow. Nobody is allowed to question why he did it. Humanity is punished. Humanity remains silent. Yet, the victims could never have imagined that their awe and fear for Enlil would echo through the ages, shaping multiple religious traditions. From that point on, Enlil would serve as the founding figure of a long line of deities honored by humankind, ultimately leading to the figure of the God of Abraham, known universally as God in Christianity, Yahweh in Judaism, and Allah in Islam. But why? And most importantly, how? Enlil is a Sumerian god and the earliest known thunderstorm deity for which written records exist. In these records, Enlil is said to have caused a great flood to erase humanity out of its existence because its noise disturbed his sleep. Prior to the flood, King Ziusudra was instructed to build a massive ark to preserve life for the world that would emerge after the flood. The design of this ship is unknown and can be hypothesized like a giant cube. But what is sure is that these Sumerian tales circulated for millennia throughout the Middle East, inspiring subsequent civilizations to compose their own versions based on such stories. The story of Ziusudra's Ark was adapted into the Ark of Atrahasis by the Akkadians, transformed into the Ark of Utnapishtim in the Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh, and ultimately became popular through the well-known version of the Ark of Noah from the Hebrew Bible with the spread of Christianity. The reason why so many civilizations found flood stories so compelling is that they predominantly settled near rivers, which were crucial for crop irrigation. However, these rivers were often prone to excessive flooding, leading to the devastation of large portions of the known world of such civilizations, and sometimes to their complete extinction. Thunderstorm deities, such as Enlil, were viewed as moody and unpredictable. They were seen as benevolent for providing rain, essential for agriculture, through their thunderstorms, but their generosity could rapidly turn into punishment if these deities poured too much water into the rivers, leading to flooding. This left farmers uncertain about what to expect when a thunderstorm occurred, making them feel more afraid than happy. This narrative is not unique to any one civilization. Throughout history, our ancestors were largely agricultural societies, for whom floods represented the worst kind of disaster. The most catastrophic flood on record, the Yangtze Huai River floods of 1931, is estimated to have killed up to 4 million people and displaced as many as 30 million. With the passing of the centuries, the popularity of Enlil spread throughout the Middle East, leading many civilizations to revere similar thunderstorm deities with similar tales and similar traditions. Most notable for us is the case in the land of Canaan, where the thunderstorm deity El Elyon was said to have had 70 sons, 2 of whom became very famous, the rain deity Baal in the north, and his thunderstorm brother Yahweh in the south. In this place, a slow transition from polytheism to monotheism occurred, with Yahweh becoming the one and only God of the Israelites. Following the Abrahamic tradition, this thunderstorm deity later also became the God of the Christians, with the advent of Jesus, and, lastly, of the Muslims under the name of Allah, when Muhammad proclaimed to be the last prophet in this tradition. There are many traces in the Bible and in the Quran where these weather characteristics of God can be found. In Judaism and Christianity, in Jeremiah 10:13, we read, "When he thunders, the waters in the heavens roar. He makes clouds rise from the ends of the earth. He sends lightning with the rain, and brings out the wind from his storehouses." In Psalms 18:13, we read, "The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded." In Nahum 1:3, we read, "The Lord is slow to anger, but great in power. The Lord will not leave the guilty unpunished. His way is in the whirlwind and the storm, and clouds are the dust of his feet." Meanwhile, in the Quran, in Surah An-Nur 24:43, we read, "Do you not see that Allah drives clouds? Then he brings them together. Then he makes them into a mass, and you can see the rain emerge from within it. And he sends down from the sky mountains of clouds, within which is hail, and he strikes with it whom he wills, and avert from who he wills. The flash of its lightning almost takes away the eyesight." Sahih International. Also, in Surah Ar-Rum 30:24, we read, "And of his signs is that he shows you lightning, arousing both fear and hope, and sends down water from the sky, and revives the earth after it is dead. Indeed, there are signs in this for those who use their reason." Sahih International. To the ancient Greeks, the same natural phenomena were interpreted as a sign of Zeus. To the Norse, it was a manifestation of Almighty Thor. To the Hindus, it was the evidence of Indra's benevolence. And to the Mongols, a display of Tengri's wrath. The thunderstorm deity Ukko was the king of the Finnish deities. Perun was the highest god in the Slavic pantheon, and the list could go on. But this was obviously not the case for all the civilizations around the world. In contrast, in regions where rain is plentiful and water easily accessible, thunderstorm deities were slightly less important. In Japan, where rain is abundant, it wasn't Raijin or Susanoo, the thunderstorm gods, who ruled the pantheon, but the sun deity Amaterasu. Similarly, in the Aztec mythology, the pantheon was not ruled by the rain god Tlaloc, but by the solar and war deity Huitzilopochtli. Moreover, in regions of the world where rain was plentiful and weather predictable, rain was almost taken for granted, leading rain deities to be even less important, or directly associated with the staple crops they helped to produce, as exemplified by the Balinese rice goddess Dewi Sri. On the contrary, the animistic tribes that still relied on hunting and gathering, as agriculture had yet to develop, the sky and the sun were the main deities, and the forests and the rivers and the animals within them were the surrounding spirits humans relied on to survive. This demonstrates that people worldwide face similar challenges. Water was important to everyone. Therefore, in regions where water was scarce, thunderstorm deities were considered the most important. Conversely, in areas where water was abundant, the sun was the most revered deity. However, the similarities between these gods are just beginning to emerge, and are so striking that they almost seem coincidental. Zeus lives on Mount Olympus, Tengri on Mount Burkhan Khaldun, and Enlil has his temple on Mount Iker. Similarly, El Elyon is associated with Mount Lel, Baal with Mount Shapanu, and Yahweh with Mount Seir in Sinai. Many thunderstorm deities were believed to live on the summits of the mountains. This notion likely emerged from the fact that ancient civilizations commonly settled near rivers originating from mountains which became the center of their known world. Additionally, because they viewed the sky overhead as the heavens, this reinforced their idea that gods must have lived on the summits of the mountains, most difficult for men to climb, closest to the divine realm. Such gods were imagined as moving around the mountaintops on top of clouds, depicted in art driving winged chariots in the skies, or having wings on either back or feet. Similarly, Sun gods were imagined as carrying the sun across the sky in their chariots to signal the cycle of day and night. When a mountain peak was shrouded in clouds, it was taken as a sign that the gods had returned to their heavenly abode. From this lofty position, they could observe all human activities, leading to an early concept of divine omniscience. The most direct way for humans to communicate with the gods was to embark on a pilgrimage and seek them at the summit. This practice is evident in religious narratives, like Moses receiving the Ten Commandments from Yahweh on Mount Sinai, and Muhammad receiving revelations on Mount Hira. Civilizations who found mountains too distant or challenging to climb erected mountain-like structures, such as the Mesopotamian ziggurats, the Egyptian pyramids, and the Mesoamerican pyramids, to make religious practices more accessible. To sustain a constant line of communication with the gods, on mountains, many temples were erected. These sanctuaries not only made climbing easier, but also expedited the process, obtaining more revelations. But once at the top, what did priests do to attract the gods' attention? In 1 Kings 18, the priests of Baal and Yahweh sacrificed bulls on Mount Carmel to seek divine intervention. For a sacrifice to be valid, humans could only offer their most valuable belongings. Abraham nearly sacrificed his son as a demonstration of his commitment to God. Luckily, he was stopped by an angel. But under the Aztecs and the Carthaginians, prisoners were not so fortunate and were commonly sacrificed. Fortunately, in most traditions, pigs, sheep, goats, camels, and bulls were considered sufficient for a sacrifice. Depending on regional availability of livestock and the family's wealth, typically, goats were the most humble sacrifices, while bulls were the most luxurious. Contrary to popular belief that only Hindus consider cows sacred, most ancient civilizations held cows as the most sacred animals. Before the Industrial Revolution introduced tractors, oxen were the primary beasts of burden in agriculture, while cows provided milk and byproducts. Consequently, the number of cows a farmer owned was a direct indicator of his wealth status, making cattle one of the earliest forms of currency and barter. In marriage negotiations, for thousands of years, dowries most often include a house and a portion of the family's cattle to provide the spouses with a secure starting point. Furthermore, bulls were considered the ultimate expression of wealth for farmers. By contributing to the reproduction and multiplication of cows, a farmer's main assets, they constituted the primary source of wealth generation. Their reproductive power served as a symbol of masculinity, which was highly prized for its role in generating wealth. Have you heard of Kamadhenu, the Hindu cow deity that fulfills all the wishes of whoever is fortunate enough to own her? Or Gavevodata, the cow whose body parts created the world, animals, and plants in Zoroastrianism? Zeus even transformed himself into a bull to seduce Europa, because the bull represented the pinnacle of virility. In fact, the farmer who owned the most powerful bull in a village was often paid by the villagers to impregnate their cows for better genetics. Therefore, for a farmer to slaughter a bull, either to eat it or to sacrifice it to the gods, was seen as the most extravagant luxury he could afford. Bulls and oxen were simply too precious in the agricultural setting, and thus became the animal of the gods, specifically of thunderstorm gods, because when they run, they make the land tremble under their feet, much like thunderstorm gods make the mountains quake with their thunder. In the ancient Near East civilizations, bulls were commonly associated with various gods. Enlil was symbolized by a bull. El Elyon was known as the bull god, and his son Baal was termed the Great Radiant Bull. However, although Yahweh, another son of El, was also frequently represented by a bull, this depiction became problematic as monotheism began to gain prominence. This is because the bull symbolism was typical of most Middle Eastern deities, causing confusion and blurring the distinction between Yahweh and other gods. This led to the ultimate rejection of such imagery for Yahweh, a shift that became necessary when Yahweh nearly exterminated humanity for worshipping the golden calf, as detailed in Exodus chapters 32 to 34. Mesopotamian deities were often depicted wearing headdresses made of bull horns to display their authority, and the arches on modern crowns may, in fact, be an evolution of bull horns or other animals' horns that humans have hunted down and worn throughout history. In the night sky, the constellation of Taurus is likely among the oldest constellations to be identified, while the constellation of Bootes symbolizes Enlil, steering the celestial oxen cart to ensure prosperity to the Sumerian farmers down below. Conversely, in civilizations where cattle were less common, rams held a sacred status, likely due to their impressive frontal attack technique, earning them a place pulling Thor's chariot. In the Middle East, camels served as a similar function to cows. As a result, camels, cows, goats, and sheep became the most appealing sacrifices a farmer could offer to the gods, a practice that continues to this day in religious celebrations, such as Eid al-Adha in Islam. Other highly revered animals include birds like eagles and cows, commonly depicted on imperial banners, and associated with divine figures such as Zeus and Athena. This reverence is rooted in the belief that birds, capable of flying in the heavens, offering a bird's-eye view of earthly events, can serve as messengers for the gods. In this sense, they function as sacred surveillance, scouting, and spying to keep the gods informed and omniscient. On the other hand, snakes are often viewed as the gods' most despised animals due to their unpredictable and swift movements, as well as their capacity to skillfully chase their prey on all kinds of terrains. They can follow humans on land, swim through water, and even climb trees. Large serpents can strangle you with their deadly force, while small ones kill you with deadly venom. Across different cultures worldwide, thunderstorm gods are commonly portrayed in battles against giant sea serpents. Yahweh versus the Leviathan in the Bible, Thor versus Jormungandr in Norse mythology, Susanoo against Yamato no Orochi in Japanese tradition, Marduk taking on Tiamat in Mesopotamian mythology, and Baal confronting a series of serpents such as Tannin, the twisted serpent, Lotan, the fugitive serpent, and the mighty serpent with 7 heads in Ugaritic mythology. This is because ancient civilizations conceptualized the world as a disc-shaped plain with a mountain in the center, surrounded by oceans whose edges were enclosed by an ice barrier, while giant sea serpents were believed to guard these seas, preventing humans from venturing to the end of the world, while explaining at the same time why those who did were never seen again. Another recurring theme, not specific to thunderstorm deities, but often extended to their offspring, who are gods and goddesses of agriculture and harvest, is that of resurrection. In the Ugaritic collection of stories, known as the Baal cycle, the rain deity Baal is killed each year by the god of death. Mot Baal's descent into the underworld symbolizes the disappearance of rain and the onset of drought. However, Baal is later resurrected by his sister Anat, who kills Mot, subsequently leading to the renewal of the land's fertility as the thunderstorms return. The theme of resurrection is not particularly prevalent among thunderstorm deities, but is more commonly employed to explain the changing of seasons, which govern the farming activities of the yearly calendar, and the appearance and disappearance of rain and drought. Many people are familiar with the resurrection of Jesus, who not only resurrected, but also demonstrated the ability to control storms, as described in Mark 4:38-40. Jesus was in the stem, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" One final recurring theme is that thunderstorm deities are often associated with the planet Jupiter. The name Jupiter itself originates from the Roman god Jupiter, who coincides with Zeus in Greek mythology. But before the Greeks, thousands of years prior, the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians referred to the planet Jupiter as Bil, a cognate of the word Bel, meaning Lord, a word very often used to refer to their highest gods, Marduk and Enlil. While in the Canaanite religion, El Elyon was linked to Saturn. His son Baal was termed the Father Jupiter. This association is likely because the planet Jupiter is the largest planet visible to the naked eye. And again, there are many more similarities we could list, but one is more important than the others. And now, it is time to reveal it. Have you ever wondered why the deities worshipped around the world often resemble the physical characteristics of the people who worship them? African civilizations predominantly worship dark-skinned deities, while East Asian civilizations typically revered gods with yellowish skin and black hair. In contrast, Northern Europeans commonly venerated gods with blonde, red, or white hair and paler skin. This phenomenon is particularly evident in the global spread of Christianity, where the figures of Mary and Jesus have been adapted to reflect the physical characteristics of the believers living in newly influenced regions. In Western countries, Mary and Jesus are portrayed with Caucasian features. In Africa, they appear dark-skinned. In Asia, they are depicted with monolid eyes. And in ancient Rome, Jesus was represented as an average Roman, dressed in a tunica and toga. Since different civilizations imagine their gods in their own likeness, a compelling question naturally arises. Is it God who created humans in his own image? Or is it humans who have imagined God in their own likeness? For thousands of years, our ancestors were unable to explain their origins. However, they observed that in nature, from one plant, a similar plant is born. From an animal, a similar animal is born. And from a human being, another human being is born with similar characteristics. By using deductive reasoning, a logical conclusion could be drawn. If a calf comes from an original cow, then it makes sense that humans must also come from an original human-like deity, one that gives origin to human beings in its own image, but itself is not born. This deductive reasoning led to the concept of anthropomorphism, highlighting the possibility that God may look similar to those who worship him. A striking example of this phenomena occurs when people typically identify with their main god. For example, the Amorites, an ancient Semitic group, identified with their storm god Amoru. When they invaded and merged with the Akkadians, this led to the formation of the Babylonian Empire. In this process, the name Amoru became Marduk in the Akkadian language. Similarly, the Amorites were translated as Marduki, clearly linking their civilization to the deity they were worshipping. This is because God was envisioned as the ultimate example that people needed to emulate in order to fully belong to their community. The way God or their prophets were portrayed to dress, eat, pray, fight, and act served as a template for how individuals were expected to live. Following these divine guidelines was essential for being part of a society. This way, the idea of God became a convergence of all the traditions and culture of a people, making the deity both the mirror and the identity of the people themselves. This is why, in many myths and artistic depictions, gods are shown doing things that humans do. They eat like us, have families and relationships like us, experience a wide range of emotions like us, and even engage in intimate relations and wars like we do. The reason why gods are represented this way is very simple. Gods were imagined by humans based on their own daily experiences and cultural norms. From this perspective, it's not surprising that thunderstorm deities were often depicted as elderly wise men with long, white beards. This image reflects the roles traditionally assigned to leaders in ancient societies, and may even have more primitive origins, dating back to the time when people gathered around the fire outside their huts to listen to the decisions of the eldest, and therefore perceived as the most experienced and wise tribal leader. Just as men were responsible for providing food for their families they created, thunderstorm deities were conceived as responsible for nourishing crops with rain. And just as men were expected to protect their families, thunderstorm deities were depicted as formidable warriors defending their most cherished creation, humans. In these ancient societies, men held ultimate authority within the household, possessing the power of life and death over family members. For millennia, defying a father, even one who was clearly abusing his power, was a quick route for wives and kids to a tragic end, included for trivial reasons. This pattern mirrors the story of Enlil, who, at the beginning of this video, unleashed a flood to wipe out humanity simply because humans disturbed his sleep. Just as farmers feared storms, so too were thunderstorm deities feared for their unpredictability. Thunderstorm deities were not considered good or bad, but simply just. People believed that although these deities could cause immense suffering through natural phenomena, their dual roles as creators and destroyers were actually two sides of the same coin, aspects that shouldn't be questioned. After all, only the deity itself knew the true reason behind its actions. It's possible that our image of God ultimately reflects the attitude of our fathers toward us in real life. Despite their apparent severity, the goal behind their actions is mostly to protect us, even though they sometimes make mistakes. Did you find this video informative? If so, here are some additional videos about the origins of the gods, their tales and religions you won't want to miss. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.